Israel's operation, Gideon's Chariots, launched May 17, 2025, has pushed Gaza to the brink of famine, with over 53,000 dead and a blockade choking 2.1 million people. Now the West is waking up, turning from allies to critics, demanding Israel end its offensive and open aid routes. In 2023, the West stood firmly with Israel. The US sent weapons, NATO condemned Hamas's terrorism, and EU nations backed Israel's right to self-defense. But Israel's relentless war, intensified by Operation Gideon's Chariots, has changed the narrative. The offensive, aiming to defeat Hamas and free 58 remaining hostages, has killed over 400 Palestinians in days, shuttered Gaza's last northern hospital, and displaced 41,000 since May 15th. An 11-week blockade has starved Gaza of food, medicine, and fuel, risking famine for 2.1 million people.
The arrival of more supplies closer to where they are needed is a positive development. It is only a drop in the ocean of what is actually needed to address the massive scale of the humanitarian operation and the humanitarian needs.
With just 4 aid trucks entering on May 19th and dozens more the next day, far below the 500 needed daily, the UN warns of catastrophe. Israel's limited aid allowance, prompted by ally pressure, falls short.
Our greatest friends in the world, senators who I know as enthusiastic supporters of Israel and without any condition, that I have known them for tens of years, come to me and tell me this: we are giving you all the assistance to complete the victory, weapons, support for your moves to eliminate Hamas, protection in the Security Council. There is one thing we cannot stand. We cannot accept images of hunger, mass hunger, and that is what we cannot stand. We won't be able to support you.
Once Israel's strongest backers, NATO allies like the UK, France, and Canada, are now leading the charge against its actions. On May 20th, the UK suspended free trade talks with Israel and imposed sanctions on West Bank settlers, citing their violence and Israel's egregious Gaza policies. Prime Minister Keir Starmer called the suffering of Gaza's children utterly intolerable.
Where the level of suffering, innocent children being bombed again, is utterly intolerable. The recent announcement that Israel will allow a basic quantity of food into Gaza, a basic quantity, is totally and utterly inadequate.
Foreign Secretary David Lammy condemned Israel's plan to displace Gazans southward, calling it monstrous and extremism.
Netanyahu's government is planning to drive Gazans from their homes into a corner of the Strip to the south and permit them a fraction of the aid that they need. We must call this what it is. It is extremism. It is dangerous. It is repellent. It is monstrous, and I condemn it in the strongest possible terms.
France and Canada joined the UK, threatening concrete actions like sanctions if Israel doesn't halt its offensive and lift the blockade. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot went further, describing Gaza as a place of death.
It is unbearable because the blind violence, the blockade of humanitarian aid by the Israeli government, have turned Gaza into a place of death, not to say a cemetery.
The EU, once divided, is uniting against Israel's actions. The Netherlands led a push to review the EU-Israel Association Agreement's human rights clause, signaling a break from past support. Dutch Foreign Minister Casper Veldkamp emphasized Europe's alarm.
This initiative has given a very clear signal to Europe, but also to Israel, that we are very seriously concerned about the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, that we want to see a full lifting of the humanitarian blockade.
European Council President Antonio Costa called Gaza a humanitarian tragedy, accusing Israel of violating international law.
Territorial integrity. The situation in Gaza is a humanitarian tragedy, where international law is systematically violated, where a whole people is being subjected to crushing, disproportionate military force.
Spain took a cultural stand, with Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez arguing Israel should be barred from Eurovision, citing double standards compared to Russia's exclusion.
The commitment from Spain to international law and human rights should be consistent and should be coherent also from Europe. And that is why I believe no one was shocked when, after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia began 3 years ago, its withdrawal from international competitions was demanded. It also does not participate, for example, and we saw this past weekend, in Eurovision. And therefore Israel should not be allowed to do it either, because what we cannot allow are double standards. Culture should be no exception.
EU leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, warned that silence on Gaza undermines the West's credibility on global issues like Ukraine.
I am not comparing any situation, but I want to insist on this for all of us. The bulk of humanity, China, India, the African continent, the Near Middle East, the Pacific, Asia, and Latin America are watching us. Sometimes they don't fully understand what we're doing in Ukraine. Let's be clear about that. But we have to accept it and explain it. But they no longer understand us at all about Ukraine when we remain silent on Gaza.
The US, Israel's staunchest ally, initially provided weapons and diplomatic cover, but now faces pressure to act. President Trump acknowledged Gaza's starvation crisis, while Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended limited aid resumption and denied allegations of US plans to deport Gazans to Libya.
We have talked to some nations about is if someone voluntarily and willingly says, I want to go somewhere else for some period of time, are there countries in the region willing to accept them for some period of time? But those would be voluntary decisions by individuals.
Senator Jeff Merkley challenged Rubio, arguing that starvation and bombing makes such choices coercive, urging enough aid to end the crisis.
I think the U.S. has a moral responsibility to fiercely convey to the Netanyahu government that using food as an instrument of war is unacceptable. It's a violation of international humanitarian law.
The US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, meant to control aid, has drawn UN criticism for militarizing relief, highlighting tensions in Washington's stance. Israel remains defiant. Prime Minister Netanyahu, under pressure from allies, allowed minimal aid, but faces domestic resistance from hardliners. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar rejected Western demands as dictates.
What I want to tell to every country, mainly those who had colonial past, this is a proud nation, an independent nation, fighting on its existence, and we will not get any dictates from outside with regard to our national security.
Ceasefire talks in Doha falter, with Israel demanding Hamas surrender, and Hamas seeking an end to hostilities. The 58 remaining hostages and Gaza's 2.1 million people hang in the balance as Western leaders push for peace. From unwavering allies to vocal critics, the West's shift marks a turning point. Sanctions, trade suspensions, and cultural rebukes signal growing resolve to end Gaza's suffering. But as Israel digs in and talks stall, The question remains, will this pressure bring peace, or will Gaza's tragedy deepen